In Haiti, social and political organizations call for a series of demonstrations to demand improvements in the quality of life in view of the increase in inflation and insecurity. Russian President Vladimir Putin said his country will follow policies aligned with its national interests. And Kenya's defeated presidential candidate Raila Odinga challenges the result of the August 9th election that handed the victory to his rival William Ruto. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Haiti, social and political organizations called for a series of demonstrations this Monday to demand improvements in the quality of life in view of the increase in inflation and insecurity. In this sense, the political movements call for a sit-in in front of the bank's offices in Cape Haiti to denounce the depreciation of at least 40% of the national currency so far this year. They also call for a massive mobilization to condemn the administration of the Premier, Ariel Henry, due to the increase in insecurity, causing more than 16,000 people to flee to seek refuge from the violence. In this context, the organization National Mobilization Space, together with labor and student unions, inform about the realization of a reconcentration to demand the measures to confront the severe crisis in the country is going through. Nicaragua will hold municipal elections on November the 6th. This Sunday, the Supreme Electoral Council, the CSE, published its first informative bulletin. Electoral officials said that the document containing information about the process through which Nicaraguans will elect mayors and deputy mayors in 153 municipalities has been prepared based on the political constitution and the electoral law. Nicaraguans will also be voted for the members of the municipal councils, known as proprietors, and their respective substitutes. The president of the Nicaragua's highest electoral body, Brenda Rocha, assured in an interview to national media that the council guarantees transparency and democratic exercise as it has done in all the previous elections.
The Supreme Electoral Council has constitutional authority to apply the legal provisions concerning electoral processes. In this sense, it is the rightful entity that has the responsibility to ensure respect for the ethical rules and democratic values and due respect among political organizations.
According to a journalistic investigation, former Colombian President Iván Duque awarded more than 30 members of his presidential escort who authorized the financing of trips charged to public funds for an amount of close to $1,364,000. Journalist Daniel Coronel reported that the former president also gave gifts to his closest circle, among them the Comptroller General Carlos Felipe Córdoba. Duque also authorized 37 men from his security detail to go on a study commission abroad. The group included aides de camp and members of his bodyguards, his wife, his children, and his chief of staff, Maria Paula Correa. In these supposed commissions, there were no policemen with low-rank positions. And the report presented by the Colombian Truth Commission unveils a state-sponsored scheme to delegitimize the peace process signed by the government of former President Juan Manuel Santos in 2016 in Havana, Cuba. The report stated that former prosecutor Néstor Humberto Martínez okayed and green-lighted an undercover operation of the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, to capture Jesús Santrich, the former member or a member of the FARC-EP guerrilla. Santrich's nephew, Marlos Marin, cooperated with the former prosecutor, who even allowed seized cocaine to be used in the setup. The chapter of the report, entitled The Obstacles to the Continuity of the Peace Processes in Colombia, makes it clear that the prosecutor's office, in charge of Martinez and the DA, partnered to undermine the peace agreement. The government of Bolivia reached an agreement on Sunday with the National Council of Quinoa Producers to end the protests. Rural Development and Land Minister Remy Gonzalez headed the government delegation that met with the quinoa producers in the town of Chayapata in the department of Oruro. At the meeting, new guidelines were defined to reactivate and support the sector of small quinoa producers in Bolivia. The 33-point list of demands prepared by the National Producers Council will be reviewed in the joint meetings. Minister Gonzalez said that after listening to the council members, he deems their demands as legitimate. Peru's President Pedro Castillo denounced on Sunday the intention of the Public Prosecutor's Office to arrest the First Lady, Lilia Paredes, for allegedly coordinating a criminal network. The Peruvian head of state maintains that the investigations he is facing for alleged corruption are the results of a conspiracy between the public ministry, sectors of the parliament, and the press. He also stressed that despite the continuous threats and conspiracies against his administration and the members of his family, his government will not give in to these attempts, which he described as coup attempts. And journalists, intellectuals, and radio listeners in Cuba celebrate the 100th anniversary of the nation's radio broadcasting, a reference in Latin America and the Caribbean. The chosen venue for the celebrations is the National Theater, where several artists will commemorate the first radio broadcastings back on August 22nd, 1922. Years later, with the revolutionary triumph, Cuban radio became not only public, but a way to instill values and social benefits messages. Today, on its 100th anniversary, it remains in the preference of the audiences, combining tradition with newness. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. The Mexican National Meteorological Service announced on Monday that heavy rains lashing a large part of the territory are causing material damage and rivers to overflow in the state of Sonora. According to preliminary reports from the civil protection authorities, dozens of homes have been affected and landslides blocking roads and highways in several municipalities of the state. The agency also reported the collapse of a bridge in the section of the Hermosillo-Guaymas Highway due to an overflowed creek. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador expressed his solidarity with the victims and sent a message in which he promised to help and announced that Army and Navy contingents were already in action. In Argentina, more than 95,000 hectares are reported burned after forest fires in the city of Paraná, while efforts continue to try to put out the flames. According to the Environmental Observatory of the National University of Rosario, more than 20,000 hectares have burned in the Paraná Delta since the beginning of August, and it's estimated that this year more than 100,000 hectares have been burned. Paula Pelzer, the doctor in natural sciences and associate professor at the University Nacional del Litoral, said that during this period the same sites in the wetlands have burned continuously, and the animals and vegetation are not ecologically adjusted to resist the fire. She warned that it will take between 300 and 400 years to recover the country's wetlands. And high temperatures in Europe in the midst of a new heat wave have left strong droughts and fires in fields and forests. Authorities in Italy assured that 6 out of the 10 fires are caused by men and have left thousands of hectares of forest and Mediterranean scrubland without vegetation. In Spain, the government reported that the fires have consumed more than 223,000 and have displaced more than 270,000 people, and they are contemplated declaring several areas as seriously affected. In Portugal, the government brigades continue fight fires throughout the territory, with the most important focus being the region of Villarreal, a mountainous and difficult-to-access area. While in Romania, the drought affected almost 403,000 hectares of agricultural land, damaging in particular the hectares of wheat, barley, oats, and rye in the country. The effects of the heat wave have also caused several forest fires in Russia that have already devastated around 5 million hectares throughout the country. Authorities warn that in the last 24 hours, the flames have ravaged more than 100,000 hectares, some 17 more than in the previous day. According to emergency officials, the forest fires in the Ryazan province have affected several nature reserves, as well as residents in Moscow. Russian President Vladimir Putin said his country will follow policies aligned with his national interests. In a video message published on Monday by the Kremlin, Putin reaffirmed the power and independence of his country and said that they are determined to implement internationally only those policies that may be in agreement with the fundamental interests of Russia. In his message, published on the occasion of National Flag Day, Putin underscored the significance of the Russian flag as a symbol of unity of the people and their loyalty to the motherland. On National Flag Day, Russia recalls victories of its forefathers who are an inspiration for the care and for to defend the nation and never allow any foreign hegemony to dictate. The European stock exchanges have registered on Monday a record high gas price at $3,000 per 1,000 cubic meters. Data from London's ICE Stock Exchange shows an increase of more than 18%, the highest since March. Hours earlier, the exchange was already trading at a top of $2,750, which was quickly surpassed. The Russian energy company Gazprom had announced earlier a suspension of the gas services through Nord Stream 1 for 3 days as of August 31st in order to carry out scheduled maintenance. The continuous increase in gas prices has marked the European markets since the Eurogroup applied a series of sanctions against Russia in the middle of the energy crisis. And now we move on to other topics. Millions of children in the Philippines returned to the classrooms on Monday for the first time since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Philippines had adopted a teaching system combining online classes, printed materials, and the use of television and social media. At present, many educational centers have implemented a hybrid system on face-to-face and distance learning for a transition to full presence as of November 2022, the deadline set by the President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Schools reopening brings back old problems like large class sizes, outdated teaching methods, poverty, and lack of basic infrastructure. The Philippines is one of the last countries in the world to resume full-time face-to-face lessons. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Kenya's defeated presidential candidate Raila Odinga filed an online petition to the country's top court on Monday, challenging the results of the August 9th election that handed victory to his rival William Ruto. Odinga, a veteran opposition leader who ran with the backing of the ruling party, has rejected the outcome of the poll. They narrowly lost to Ruto by around 230,000 votes, less than 2 percentage points. Although polling day passed off peacefully, the announcement of the results a week ago sparked angry protests in some Odinga strongholds, and there are fears that a drawn-out dispute may lead to violence in a country with history of post-poll unrest. Judges now have 14 days to issue a ruling. If they order an annulment, a new vote must be held within 60 days. Mali's transitional government and the president, General Assimi Goïta, appoints Colonel Abdoulaye Maïga as the country's prime minister. The presidential office reported that the health of the former Prime Minister Shongel Kokala Maïga prevented him from continuing his functions. The now former Prime Minister was appointed by the military junta and has been in hospital since August 10th. The reasons for his illness have not been officially explained. Shongel Kokala was the president of the June 5th movement, involved in the overthrow of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta in 2020. The Arab League has warned the Israeli occupation of the consequences of their actions if they were to attack the Al-Aqsa Mosque. On the occasion of the 53rd anniversary of the fateful attack on the mosque, one of the holiest places of the Muslim faith, the Arab League issued a statement expressing its solidarity with the Palestinian people, especially the people of Jerusalem, in the face of Israeli attacks and provocations. The Arab League recalls that Israel has been committing crimes against Palestine since 1948 with the intention of changing the status of Jerusalem with the Al-Aqsa Mosque as its main target. The Arab Alliance has also renewed its call to the international community to support the Palestinian people and to take whatever measures necessary to make Israel to stop its aggressions. And in the midst of a company reshuffle process, Israeli group NZO's CEO Shalev Julio announced his resignation. The company is mostly known for the Pegasus spy software. The NZO group will also shed 100 jobs and appoint Yaron Shohat as the new CEO. Julio said he will remain in the company but has a supervisor of mergers and acquisitions. The company also said that it will evaluate every aspect of its business, including strategic operations, in order to remain one of the world's leading high-tech cyber intelligence companies, in spite of several administrations having blacklisted it as an entity involved in transnational repression. And Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong announced on Sunday that his country will repeal a colonial law criminalizing sex between men, although the government will continue to defend that marriage is between a man and a woman. The legislation, a legacy of the British colonial era, penalizes sex between men with up to 2 years in prison. LGBTQI+ activists have long argued that the law clashes with the city-state's increasingly modern culture, and in the past they have filed 2 appeals in the court to overturn it without success. In 2018, India's Supreme Court decriminalized same-sex relationships, spurring activists in Singapore to renew their efforts to abolish the law. The following year, Taiwan made the decision to legalize same-sex marriage, in a first for Asia. The first attempt to overturn the law in Singapore was rejected in 2014, and last February, the Court of Appeal dismissed the second appeal. Gay rights advocates expressed relief at the government's decision. A new parts of grain silos damaged by the 2020 Beirut port explosion collapsed, the third such incident at the dockside harbor this month. The towers that came scrambling down were among the last remaining chunks of the structure's northern block, which sustained the most damage during the explosion. Experts had been warning for days that the silos could collapse imminently. Nearly 2 years after a massive blast rocked the port of Beirut, many residents have been reliving the trauma for weeks due to a persistent fire in the ruins at the port's grain silos, risking a total collapse. The silos house most of Lebanon's grain reserves from the 1970s until August 4, 2020, when tons of improperly stored ammonium nitrate exploded in a warehouse located just meters from the port, leaving more than 200 people dead and entire neighborhoods in the capital flattened. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs rejected criticism by the U.S. ambassador in Beijing about its response to Congressional Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has reminded the U.S. Ambassador Nicholas Burns that the only one responsible for the situation is Washington. The U.S. diplomat described the Chinese response as overdimensioned. The Foreign Ministry pointed out in this response to the U.S. representative that his government never heeded Beijing's warnings, the calls for dialogue, and the efforts to prevent the conflict from escalating. China resumes military maneuvers on Monday with live fire on the coast of Zhejiang, and in response to the remarks of the U.S. diplomat, it reiterates that the provocations and their consequences are at its own expense. TeleSUR English continues to grow. Its signal now reaches Europe. You can order it from your cable dealer or tune it yourself. These parameters that you see on the screen are in place since July 1st. Quite soon, further changes will be implemented for the signals in the Middle East and Africa. Now, more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are heard in other farther away nations. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. And now also, you can follow us on TikTok in our account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.